Insurrection is more interesting as a phenomenon than it is as a film. It's the Franklin Pierce of the Trek films, forgettable and ineffectual without being infamously awful. Today it stands as part of the odd-numbered films sucks and is just a plain bad movie, which is why I say it's interesting because at the time that wasn't the case. If you take a film like The Princess Bride, which had moderate success in theaters but went on to eventually become a famous part of popular culture, Insurrection is the flip side of the coin, hitting theaters hard but then falling flat on its face. While it is now critically mixed, at the time a substantial number said that it broke the odd-numbered rule. I know it sounds unbelievable, but that's because it's a movie that doesn't stand the test of time. Star Trek Insurrection was written by, of all people, Michael Piller, who had delivered a lot of great scripts and stories over the years. But he had never done a featured film before, and one of the most common criticisms of it is precisely that. It feels like an episode of the show, and a mediocre one at that. It also reflects some of the direction Piller seemed to have been taking in his writing at this time, from the story and character of Chakotay to the backstory of the Maquis involving the, well, I'll say Indians because I'm not sure what the correct term is for Native Americans who are neither in America nor native to where they're living right now. So it's really not surprising this story will have elements of a culture trying to relocate another, more earthy culture. Poor Insurrection. It isn't loved like 2, popular like 4, prescient like 6, exciting like 8. It doesn't have people rushing to defend it, saying it's cerebral like 1, significant like 3, ambitious like 5, landmark like 7, or theatrical like 10. Insurrection stands alone. Bad enough to be hated, but not bad enough to be loved. So it goes without saying that such a film does not stand up at all to repeat viewings, and any analysis quickly reveals the seams in the movie. When we finish, I'll talk about why I think the film started as it did and finished where it is now. There's a sad irony that Piller's film, about the search for eternal life and how some conspire to use it to heal incurable diseases, was the only big screen feature he'd ever write before his tragic death due to cancer in 2005. And that a man who had helped pull Star Trek from dying series to mainstream success had what ultimately proved a failure. What's more, that he wrote a book called Fade In, which told the creation of Insurrection from the writer's perspective from start to finish, with lots and lots of behind-the-scenes documents. A book that never saw publication. It was accidentally released on the internet last year, so it did provide more insight into the ideas behind the film and to help see where things took the wrong turns that resulted in this film. If you want to read it, just try looking around the internet until eventually you find it. A lot of Trekkies, I'm sure, are still trading it. Well, let's get started. Into the land of frolic, where life is so rurally sweet and... oh, the fields. That'll keep the village fed for an entire weekend. Everyone's happy except maybe that little old lady pushing the cart. Can't we have a machine to do this? You take something away from the man. Now push faster, Grandma. This reminds me of Conundrum. One photon torpedo should be able to take care of this problem and end the movie now. I spent some time trying to think of why this opening quickly grew grating for me, and why it would continue to get worse until Picard's return to the Enterprise. It was on reading Piller's book and the description of this place with 2 words, rural simplicity, that made it crystallize. It was the same reason that the description of the early TNG humans always grated me. It was a declaration, this is perfection, that was so secure of itself that its very presence said, and anything that isn't is flawed. Roddenberry's Earth and Piller's Baku were each man's idea of paradise. The former of a world where humans no longer followed human impulses and technology would make things better, never worse. An idea of its time, that science and technology can solve our problems, even the ones it seems that they might have caused, and we'd all follow ideals that he felt were best. Piller's was similar in that the humanoids were so perfect, we'll get to that even more later, but rather than embracing technology to solve those problems, it's the New Age 90s era of spirituality and back to nature and, as he said, rural simplicity. They both suffer from the same sin. Paradise protests too much. It tries so hard to make everything perfect, you can see just how impossible this perfection is. For instance, look at how impossibly clean this place is. Like the Forreston resolutions, people think when you remove humanity and go back to nature, the Garden of Eden is waiting. It isn't. The closer you get to nature, especially when you reject technology, the dirtier things get, and so the harder you have to work to keep it clean. And I don't know if any of you ever worked on a farm. I did for less than a week, and let me tell you, the first thing I felt like doing when I finished was to start washing, sweeping, and polishing everything to within an inch of its life before mowing the lawn with hand tools and removing all the weeds from it without technology. But that was the sunstroke kicking in. After that, I just wanted to shower and then pray to God to strike me dead before the next sunrise. And that's just one of many examples I could give, and believe me, it's taking restraint not to get into all of them. But I should probably leave some room to talk about everything that happens after the opening credits finish. I am curious, though, how these close-to-the-earth common clay Übermensches got all the metal they're using. They probably got a tree that grows metal ingots or something, easy enough to temper in what looks like a backyard barbecue. Where's the quarry scarring the landscape for all this cut stone they're using? Their small-town wholesomeness must cover that up. The clear-cut forest for all this wood? Covered up by a prayer to Gaia, probably. I'm telling you, one photon torpedo. These assholes are the Baku, and they're being watched from this duck blind by a combination of Federation and Sona observers. There are also some people wandering around in invisible red suits. That's Starfleet, isn't it? Send doctors and psychiatrists into a war zone with a phaser and a tricorder, but send people in to study the space Amish in cloaking outfits. We find out that they're all chasing Data, who seems to have run amok, causing all kinds of wacky invisibility effects.
Commander Data, stand down. That's an order.
Can lieutenants actually give lieutenant commanders orders? I truly don't know for sure that they can't. I tried typing that into Google, but it's so nonsensical, Google just breaks and starts showing pictures of porn. Anyway, Data reveals the duck blind to the Baku and takes the observers all prisoner. Based upon the standard video game rules, taking out the duck blind automatically makes all the other people who are invisible visible too. We return to the Enterprise E and see the new dress uniforms to go with the new regular uniforms, and likewise they're an improvement over the miniskirt over pants look of the last ones. Picard's in the midst of doing 6 things at once, including formalizing a meeting with a new species that just discovered warp drive. But between the Borg and the Dominion, they need all the help they can get. Worf just wanders into the picture without them even bothering to provide him with a reason this time. Something to do with some colony he was on, but he doesn't even get to finish. That's fine, Worf. You're not here to develop anyway. You're here to be laughed at. If you want anything else, head back over to Deep Space Nine. These aliens seem to be some cross between frog people and a beanbag chair, and they give Picard this lovely headwear. Beautiful pearls. Where do they come from? My abdominal glands. The fun's interrupted when Geordi reports that Admiral Dougherty wants data schematics, and Picard learns directly from the Admiral about the hostages. When Picard plans to come check it out for himself, he's told this area, called the Briar Patch, is difficult for most ships to pass through without being properly fitted. Picard muses on what might cause this problem.
His emotion chip?
He didn't take it with him.
Wow. So in Generations it was fused and can't be deactivated. In First Contact it's fused but can be deactivated. Now it can just be removed. By Nemesis it'll just be a cologne Data puts on in the morning. Brent Spiner had told Piller that he was concerned that he didn't think he understood his character. And given what we see, I'm afraid it's a sentiment hard to disagree with. With the possible exception of Generations, Insurrection is the film most guilty of feeling like an episode. And part of that is that Data seems to have de-aged about 7 years himself, engaging in the kind of antics he might have on the show, but that now just ignore all the character growth that he's undergone. But let's meet our villain, Ruafo, played by F. Murray Abraham, who Lord knows tries to do something with his comic book role. Look at his stretched out face. He could be a Dick Tracy villain. Still, he does have one of the best command chairs in Star Trek, a big comfy couch. You can't help but admire someone who says, screw it, I just want to be comfortable. He's here because Data, using perfect android logic, has flown up at the ship, shot at it a few times, and then just leaves, having accomplished nothing other than satisfying the demand for a space action scene in the first act. Troy and Riker are charged with 2 important tasks in service of the script. I mean, the Federation. They need to provide all the exposition on the Sona and use this scene to establish the romance necessary to carry the sexiness of the film. I sometimes put intentional misstatements in for comedy, but I had to go back and edit that when I put in episode rather than film. That's just how much this feels like an episode. But then the excitement really picks up.
The torque sensors are out of alignment by 12 microns. You could hear that?
When I was an ensign, I could detect a 3-micron misalignment.
Ah, more tales of the wild youth of Picard. Tell us about your stamp collection, why don't you? Dougherty and Ruffo announced the plan to terminate Data, but Picard has had Worf rigging up a technobabble plan to shut Data down, and damn it, I don't care if this is a movie or not. Around here, we solve all problems with technical gibberish. So Picard will be given his chance, with the understanding that if he fails, he'll have to destroy Data. So he heads out, and Starfleet's been busy since first contact. The Enterprise E not only has a ship called the Captain's Yacht, but also a shuttle bay located near the top of the ship. Wow, both would have been useful in stopping the Borg. Maybe that's the reason Starfleet wouldn't send him to fight the Borg after all. The ship just wasn't finished yet. The shuttles won't be here until Tuesday.
Transmit a wideband covariant signal. That ought to get his attention.
He'll come to try and figure out what the hell I'm talking about. Sure enough, and he starts firing, even when Picard tells him who he is. Worf comes up with a tech plan to get Data out, but Data unleashes a counter-tech plan to stop him. As usual, combat has suddenly turned into a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So Picard decides to play the man and not the game.
Mr. Worf, do you know Gilbert and Sullivan?
No, sir. I have not had a chance to meet all the new crew members since I have been back.
They're composers, Worf. From the 19th century.
So they're aliens like Guinan. Well, this is their brilliant plan.
A British tar is a soaring soul, as free as a mountain bird. His energetic
Yeah,
fist should be
let's
ready
take
to
a break
resist
here.
A dictatorial word. Sing, Worf, sing.